Have you ever noticed something strange? The deeper you think, the quieter your world becomes. Conversations feel shorter, connections feel thinner, and the more clearly you start to see, the less people seem willing to listen. That feeling isn't in your head. Society has always been uncomfortable with deep thinkers, not because they're wrong, but because they see things others would rather avoid. History has shown it again and again. Minds that questioned too much, saw too far, or spoke too honestly were often ignored, ridiculed, or pushed aside, not for lacking intelligence, but for making people uncomfortable. And there's a reason for that. When you stand next to someone physically strong, you might admire them. When you meet someone wealthy, you might feel inspired, maybe even a little envious. But it doesn't shake who you are at your core. Intelligence is different. When you encounter someone who thinks deeply, who questions what everyone else accepts, it doesn't just introduce a new idea, it reflects something back at you, your assumptions, your limits, your blind spots, and that reflection can feel uncomfortable. Psychologists often describe this as a kind of mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't need to say anything directly. Their perspective alone can make others aware of things they'd rather not face. And most people, without even realizing it, will resist that feeling, not because they hate intelligence, but because they protect their identity. See, strength, money, appearance, these are external. They don't challenge how you see yourself on the inside. But intelligence is tied directly to identity, to beliefs, to understanding, to the way you make sense of the world. So when someone challenges that, even quietly, it can feel personal. And when something feels like a threat to identity, the mind doesn't lean in, it pulls away. That's why deep conversations often get cut short. Why complex ideas are met with silence. Why people change the subject the moment things go beyond surface level. It's not always disinterest, it's discomfort, a kind of mental self-defense. And this is where the isolation begins. Not because deep thinkers choose to be alone, but because the depth they bring isn't always welcomed. People naturally gravitate toward what feels easy, familiar, and safe, towards certainty, even if it's shallow. That's why confident voices often get more attention than thoughtful ones, why simple answers spread faster than complex truths, why people who say what others want to hear rise quickly, while those who ask difficult questions often stand alone. It's a paradox. The more you seek truth, the less you fit into spaces built on comfort. And science actually supports this. When someone feels intellectually challenged or outmatched, the brain can react as if it's facing a threat. The same region linked to fear and survival becomes active. Meaning, deep thinking doesn't just challenge ideas, it can trigger a defensive response on a biological level. So people don't just disagree, they withdraw, they dismiss, they avoid, not always consciously, but instinctively. And once you understand this, things start to make sense. The silence, the distance, the feeling of being too much or too different. It's not a flaw, it's a consequence of seeing beyond what most people are comfortable facing. But here's the part that matters. Isolation doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean you should shrink your thoughts. It doesn't mean you should stop questioning. It means you're operating at a level that requires different spaces, different conversations, different people. Because depth is not meant for every room, and not everyone is ready to meet you there. Have you ever wondered why intelligence can feel like a curse? Why the smarter you get, the lonelier it seems? It's not just in your head. The truth is, human brains are wired in ways that make deep thinking feel threatening to others. For most of history, survival didn't depend on being the smartest person in the room. It depended on being accepted by the group. Our ancestors thrived in tribes where social harmony meant safety. Being rejected by the group could mean vulnerability, even death. That's why our brains are naturally tuned to value social acceptance over intellectual pursuit. When a highly intelligent person enters a social space, they unconsciously disrupt the group balance. Their presence challenges accepted ideas, norms, and behaviors, and the brain reacts as if it's facing a potential threat. That's why so many deep thinkers feel isolated. It's not because they lack social skills. It's because intelligence itself makes them stand out in a world that values fitting in over standing out. A 2021 study at Stanford found something fascinating. When people interact with an intellectual one-on-one, they feel less threatened. But in a group, the response spikes dramatically. Why? Social status matters more in groups. When someone feels outshined, the instinct is to undermine or exclude them, not because they dislike intelligence, but to protect their own social standing. This explains why deep thinkers often thrive in private conversations, but struggle in larger social settings. Psychologists also point to cognitive biases that make intelligence uncomfortable for others. The Dunning-Kruger effect. People with low ability overestimate themselves, while highly intelligent people often doubt themselves. This leads the less knowledgeable to dismiss deep thinkers. Status quo bias. Humans prefer familiar ideas. New complex truths can feel threatening. The backfire effect. When people encounter ideas that contradict their beliefs, they often double down instead of reconsidering. And in the digital age, this resistance has only intensified. Social media rewards simplicity over depth. Viral content favors emotionally charged, shallow sound bites rather than nuanced, intellectual discussion. The more profound your ideas, the harder it is to reach a wide audience. Society increasingly values entertainment over enlightenment, making it tougher for deep thinkers to gain acceptance. So, what does this mean for intellectuals? The rejection of intelligence isn't just social, it's biological, psychological, and cultural. It's woven into human nature, reinforced by group dynamics and amplified by technology. That doesn't mean deep thinkers should hide their thoughts. It means they must understand the forces working against them. But if society resists intelligence, what does it embrace? Comfort, predictability, familiarity. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers, argued that intelligence is not just a gift, it's a curse. The smarter you are, the more difficult it is to connect with society. Why? Because most people live driven by the will to live, seeking pleasure, comfort, and survival. Highly intelligent people operate differently. They pursue truth even when it brings discomfort, pain, or isolation. While most find meaning in entertainment, relationships, and routine pleasures, deep thinkers crave understanding. They see through deception, lies, and trivial social games. They notice the futility of chasing money, power, or status for its own sake. And this awareness makes them appear distant, indifferent, or even cold to the majority. Schopenhauer believed a high degree of intellect isolates a person. The more you understand, the less you can ignore. Awareness of the world's flaws can feel like a burden, a blessing that often resembles a curse. Intelligence forces confrontation, not with the world, but with ourselves. And most people would rather avoid those uncomfortable truths. That's why deep thinkers often feel misunderstood, alienated, or resented, not because they are wrong, but because they reflect truths that others are unwilling to face. The paradox is clear. The sharper your mind, the more isolated your path becomes. Yet, it's precisely that clarity, that depth, that allows true visionaries to change the world. The harder you think, the lonelier it feels. The deeper your mind, the harder it is to find happiness in a world built for comfort. For Schopenhauer, intelligence and happiness were inversely related. He believed that ignorance, not wisdom, was the true key to contentment. That's why so many brilliant minds throughout history, from Pascal to Kafka, often struggled with depression, existential crises, and social isolation. But Schopenhauer didn't just diagnose the problem, he offered solutions. Embrace solitude. He saw solitude not as punishment, but as a privilege. Deep thinkers should use their alone time for intellectual and creative pursuits, rather than seeking validation from society. True growth comes from cultivating your own mind, not fitting into the expectations of others. Seek like-minded individuals. Instead of trying to blend into the mainstream, Schopenhauer advised surrounding yourself with people who think like you, through books, philosophy, or intellectual circles. Connection doesn't come from the majority, it comes from shared depth. Engage with the world wisely. He warned against revealing insights to those unprepared to receive them. Observation and careful communication are key. Not everyone is ready for the truths a deep thinker sees. His philosophy is a guide for modern intellectuals navigating social rejection. While intelligence may bring loneliness, it also grants freedom, wisdom, and a richer understanding of life. Schopenhauer saw intelligence as a double-edged sword, a source of both insight and isolation. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself, it fears what intelligence reveals. Deep thinkers aren't rejected because they are wrong, they are rejected because they are right, often too soon. If you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, know this: you are not broken. You are simply seeing the world for what it really is. But does this mean deep thinkers are doomed to isolation? Not necessarily. The truth is, society isn't built to embrace depth. It's built to maintain stability. Most people prefer comfort over truth, simplicity over complexity. That's why shallow conversations, repetitive ideas, and viral content dominate our culture. Why does comfort outweigh intellectual depth? It comes down to human psychology. Our brains crave certainty and predictability. Psychologists call this cognitive ease, the preference for simple, familiar information because it requires less mental energy. Complicated, nuanced, or unfamiliar ideas feel difficult, even threatening. System justification and groupthink further reinforce this. People rationalize outdated beliefs and conform to social norms rather than risk rejection. Intellectual dissent challenges the status quo, which is uncomfortable for most, even when it's rooted in truth. In today's digital world, this dynamic is amplified. Who captures attention online? Not intellectuals, but those who can condense complex ideas into quick, viral, feel-good sound bites. Thought-provoking discussions struggle because depth takes time, while controversy, humor, and outrage spread instantly. Algorithms reward engagement, not insight, leaving rational discourse sidelined. Echo chambers form, reinforcing existing beliefs and resisting new perspectives. This rejection begins early, in the very institutions shaping our minds. Schools claim to value intelligence, but obedience is rewarded over independent thought. Questioning authority often labels students as troublemakers. In workplaces, innovation and intellect matter less than fitting the culture and maintaining existing power structures. Yet, understanding these patterns empowers deep thinkers. Loneliness is not failure. Isolation is not weakness. The challenge of thinking differently is the mark of intelligence. Those who persevere in thought, observation, and careful engagement may feel apart from the majority, but they are cultivating wisdom and insight few can achieve. Schopenhauer reminds us, intelligence may isolate, but it also liberates. It allows you to see the world clearly, to understand deeply, and to live intentionally. And in that clarity, even loneliness becomes a form of freedom. Politics, leaders, and society have a pattern. Bold, logical ideas are often rejected, while simple, comforting messages are celebrated. History proves this time and again. The most celebrated intellectuals were often outcasts during their lifetimes. Their insights were disruptive, ahead of their time, and sometimes threatening to the status quo. Society claims to value intelligence, innovation, and critical thinking, but in reality, it only celebrates these qualities once they are safe, familiar, and widely accepted. Consider the examples. Galileo was imprisoned for proving the Earth revolves around the sun. Today, we call him a genius. Vincent van Gogh died in poverty, yet his paintings now sell for millions. Nikola Tesla revolutionized electricity, but lived and died in obscurity. Alan Turing's work helped end World War II and laid the foundation for modern computing, yet he was persecuted for his personal life. Hypatia of Alexandria, a rare female philosopher and mathematician, was murdered by extremists simply for teaching science and reason. These thinkers shared one thing in common: their ideas were too advanced for their time, and society often punished brilliance. Socrates questioned commonly held beliefs, encouraging people to think critically, and paid for it with his life. Galileo challenged centuries of religious dogma and endured house arrest. Nietzsche's radical philosophy was dismissed as madness, only to later reshape modern thought. Tesla's visionary ideas were suppressed by industrialists who profited from the status quo. Turing's brilliance was overshadowed by prejudice, ending tragically. And Hypatia's intellect challenged authority and cost her everything. The lesson is clear: society doesn't fear intelligence itself. It fears what intelligence represents: change, disruption, and questioning the comfortable illusions that maintain power. So, if you're a deep thinker, does that mean you're doomed to isolation? Not at all. It means you need to navigate wisely. Not every person or group is ready for deep conversations. Reserve your most profound thoughts for those who truly appreciate them. You don't need the majority to understand you, just the right people. Seek like-minded thinkers, whether through books, communities, or intellectual circles. Communication matters too. Einstein said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." Deep thinkers see what others don't, and that can make people uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean you stop thinking or exploring. Schopenhauer once said, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." Deep thinkers shape humanity. They push progress forward, and while society may fear or reject them at first, their ideas endure. If you've ever felt like an outsider because of your thoughts, remember this: you are not alone. Your perspective matters, your depth matters, and history proves that it is the uncomfortable, the misunderstood, and the bold who change the world. If this video resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced rejection for thinking deeply? Let's start a conversation. And if you want to explore more insights from history's greatest minds, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started.